She had always loved the piano. It was the first thing she ran to when she woke up in the morning, and often the last thing she touched before going to sleep. Her fingers would dance over the keys, sometimes clumsily, sometimes gracefully, but always with a deep love that made her forget everything else around her. Music had been her escape, her friend, and her way to express feelings she could never put into words. Yet, no matter how much she practiced, there were people who doubted her, people who thought her love for the piano was nothing more than a silly hobby. She had been invited to a small community event, a gathering of neighbors and friends who came together to enjoy music, stories, and laughter. It was the kind of event that was meant to be comforting and casual, but to her, it felt like walking into a room where everyone had already made up their mind about her. The thought of playing in front of them made her stomach twist with nerves. She knew she was capable of more than what people had seen before, but what if they laughed again? What if her hands trembled, and she hit the wrong keys and everyone thought she had no talent at all? As she arrived, the room was already buzzing with chatter. People were smiling and greeting each other, but she could feel eyes on her. Among them was a man who had once teased her at a smaller gathering, someone who had laughed at her attempts when she had played just a few simple notes months ago. She tried to ignore him, tried to focus on the piano waiting at the front of the room, but his presence made her chest tighten. She reminded herself of all the hours she had spent practicing in her small, quiet room, the time she had stayed up late just to perfect a passage, the sweat and frustration and moments of doubt she had overcome. She knew she had improved, and deep down, she wanted to show them. The piano was polished and slightly worn, its black and white keys gleaming under the soft lights. She approached it slowly, her heart beating faster with every step. Around her, people were still talking, some turning to glance at her as she reached the bench. She sat down and placed her hands over the keys, trying to calm herself. She closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep breath, remembering the countless times she had sat here alone, imagining an audience, imagining the music flowing perfectly from her fingers. This was just like those moments, only now there were real people watching, waiting. The room grew quieter as she began to play. At first, it was only a few simple notes, a soft melody that seemed almost timid. She could feel the skeptic watching, his expression unreadable, his eyes sharp and critical. The whispers of others faded, replaced by a tense silence, as if everyone knew something important was about to happen but didn't yet understand what. She focused on the keys, on the way the sound moved through her, and slowly, a confidence she hadn't expected began to rise within her. She remembered the pieces she had practiced tirelessly, the long hours of perfecting each note until it felt like an extension of herself. She could hear her own heartbeat in the quiet room, each thump reminding her that this was her moment, that she had worked for this, that she deserved to be heard. The first few notes were steady, deliberate, and as she continued, she began to feel the music in a way she never had before. Her fingers moved almost instinctively, guided by years of practice and an inner understanding of the piano's voice. The sound grew richer, fuller, and the melody she had imagined so many times in her room now flowed out into the room, touching every listener. The people around her started to notice the change. The skeptic's smirk began to fade, replaced by a look of surprise. Others leaned forward slightly, curious, unable to look away as the music enveloped the space. She could feel the tension in the room, a collective realization that something extraordinary was unfolding. She kept playing, letting the music carry her, letting it speak the words she had never been able to say. There was no room for doubt now, no place for fear. Only the piano, only the melody, only the connection between her and those who had come to watch. Her mind drifted back to the moments of struggle, the times she had wanted to give up, the nights when the music seemed impossible to grasp. And now, here she was, not perfect, but alive in every note she played. She noticed small gestures of admiration, subtle nods, quiet smiles from people who had doubted her. It was not just the skeptic. Everyone in the room seemed caught off guard by the beauty and emotion she was putting into her performance. Each note became a little victory, a statement that she had worked hard, that she had something to share, and that she would not let the judgments of others define her. As she continued, She felt a warmth spreading through her chest, a mix of relief and pride. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was her voice, her courage, her story. She remembered why she had fallen in love with it in the first place. The way music could move people, the way it could transform a moment, the way it could make hearts beat in time with hers. She had always known the piano could do this, but now she understood that the music was not only for her, but for everyone who heard it, even the ones who had laughed at her before. When she finally finished the short piece she had prepared, there was a pause, a moment of silence where everyone processed what they had just heard. She opened her eyes slowly, met the gaze of the skeptic, and saw the surprise and respect there. The room was quiet, but the energy had shifted. She had not just played notes. She had told a story, shared a piece of herself, and it had landed with more impact than she could have imagined. She allowed herself a small smile, feeling both exhausted and exhilarated. The first step had been the hardest, the moment of doubt and nervousness that had made her question herself. But now she felt a sense of accomplishment she had never felt before. She knew that this was only the beginning, that there would be more challenges and more skeptics in the future. But she also knew that she had the strength and the talent to face them. She had proven to herself, more than anyone else, that her love for the piano was real and powerful. As the room slowly returned to conversation, people approached her quietly, offering compliments, expressing amazement. She nodded and smiled, feeling the warmth of their words, but most importantly, she felt the quiet satisfaction of knowing that she had faced her fears and emerged victorious. The music had spoken for her when words could not, and the room had listened. It was a moment she would carry with her, a reminder of what was possible when she believed in herself, even when others did not. She left the event with her heart still racing. The applause and whispers of amazement from the audience replayed in her mind, making her both proud and nervous. She had taken a big step, but she knew this was just one small moment in a long journey. The fear of judgment had not completely gone, and the memory of the skeptical eyes still lingered. She wanted to do more, to show herself and everyone else that this was only the beginning. But first, she needed to understand how far she had come and how much further she could go. Back in her small room, she sat at her piano, letting her fingers rest lightly on the keys. The room was quiet, almost sacred in its stillness, and she felt the familiar mix of excitement and nervous energy. She thought about all the times she had struggled to learn, the mistakes that had seemed endless, the frustration when her fingers wouldn't move the way she wanted them to. There had been nights she had cried out of sheer despair, thinking she would never get it right. But each time she had picked herself up, she had returned to the piano with determination, driven by something she could not explain, something deeper than talent or skill. She remembered her earliest lessons, sitting on a small, rickety bench in a music school that smelled faintly of dust and chalk. The first time she tried to play a simple scale, her fingers had stumbled over the keys, creating a clumsy, uneven sound. The teacher had smiled kindly but encouraged her to try again. Over and over, she had repeated the scale until her fingers memorized each movement, until the sound began to feel natural. She thought of how much time she had spent alone, practicing in her room late at night when everyone else was asleep, letting the music fill the empty spaces around her. Those hours had been long and lonely, but they had taught her patience, focus, and persistence. As she played softly, she allowed her mind to drift to the times she had been laughed at, the moments when someone would hear her play and dismiss her efforts. There had been neighbors, friends, even family members who thought her obsession with the piano was silly, that it would never lead to anything. She had felt small, embarrassed, even angry. But instead of giving up, she had turned those feelings into fuel. She had practiced harder, stayed longer, and learned more complex pieces that challenged her abilities and pushed her limits. Every mistake she made had become a lesson, every stumble a step closer to mastery. Her thoughts returned to the small gathering where she had just played. The memory of the skeptic's face, his raised eyebrows and faint smirk, came back to her. She had felt a pang of fear at first, but now she realized that fear had been important. It had made her focus, made her careful, made her reach for a level of expression she might not have otherwise achieved. She wanted to do more than just meet expectations. She wanted to exceed them. She wanted to take the music she loved and show that it had power, that it could move people in ways words could not. She began to play a more complicated piece, one she had been struggling with for weeks. Her fingers danced over the keys, sometimes hesitating, sometimes flying with confidence. The notes did not always flow perfectly, but each mistake was part of her learning, a reminder that progress was not about perfection but about growth. She could feel the music in her chest, hear it in her mind, and see it with her eyes closed. The room seemed to come alive as her emotions poured into the melody. She was not just practicing. She was telling a story, one that carried the weight of every doubt, every tear, every late night spent alone at the piano. Hours passed unnoticed. The sun dipped low, casting warm light through her window, and still she played. She practiced scales, arpeggios, and simple melodies, but always with purpose, always with attention. Her mind was alert, noticing every subtle nuance in the sound, every detail in the movement of her hands. She experimented with dynamics, letting the soft notes whisper and the loud notes command attention. She discovered small tricks that made the music richer, textures that added depth and feeling. Each discovery felt like a small triumph, proof that persistence and patience were paying off. As she paused, she thought about the future. She wanted to play for more people, to share her music beyond her quiet room. But the fear of judgment still lingered, reminding her of the laughter, of the skepticism she had faced. Yet, that fear was no longer paralyzing. It was motivating. She realized that anyone could be critical, but it was her responsibility to keep practicing, to keep growing, and to let the music speak for itself. The room around her, filled with the familiar shadows of furniture and the faint scent of her late-night tea, felt like a safe place to experiment, to fail and to succeed. Memories of encouragement also surfaced. Her piano teacher's words, sometimes harsh, sometimes gentle, reminded her that talent was only part of the journey, and effort, discipline, and heart mattered more. Friends who had supported her quietly, listening to her play even when the notes were off, had given her the courage to continue. She realized that her journey was not just about proving something to the skeptic or to anyone else. It was about proving to herself that she could keep moving forward, that she could face fear and turn it into something beautiful. She spent the evening piecing together a small recital in her mind. She imagined the order of pieces, the emotion behind each note, the way she wanted to express herself. The challenge was not just technical. It was emotional. She wanted the audience to feel her story, to connect with her journey, to sense the hours of struggle and the joy of discovery. She wanted to show that music was not just sound, but a living thing, shaped by the soul of the person who played it. By the time the room darkened and the moonlight streamed through the window, she had played countless pieces, some perfectly, some flawed, but all filled with honesty and heart. She felt exhausted, yet exhilarated. Every mistake had been a lesson, every success a confirmation that she was capable of more than she had imagined. She realized that the journey was far from over, that there would be more skeptics, more challenges, and more moments of doubt. But she also knew that she had built a foundation strong enough to support her growth. Sitting quietly, she reflected on the evening, on the laughter she had once faced, and on the applause she had received. Both had shaped her, both had given her something to hold on to. She understood that criticism and praise were fleeting. What mattered was the music she created, the effort she put into her craft, and the joy she found in playing. That realization filled her with a sense of calm and determination. She was ready to continue, to explore more, to take risks, and to keep growing as a musician and as a person. She ended the night by playing a simple melody, one that reminded her of why she had started this journey in the first place. It was quiet, gentle, and unassuming, but it carried a depth that came from years of struggle, practice, and perseverance. The notes lingered in the air, soft echoes that seemed to speak to her directly. She knew that this was only the beginning, that the next step would be just as challenging, but she felt ready. The piano was not just an instrument. It was a partner in her journey, a companion that had seen her at her lowest and celebrated her highest. And as she closed the lid and sat back, she knew that no matter what happened next, she had proven to herself that she had the courage, the heart, and the skill to keep moving forward. The day of the next performance arrived, and she felt a mix of excitement and nerves that she could not shake. She had practiced tirelessly since the first gathering, perfecting every note, every transition, and every subtle touch of the keys. She knew that this time, the room would be full of people who had heard of her last performance, some curious, some skeptical, and some simply unaware of her ability. The thought of all those eyes on her made her heart race, but she also felt a quiet confidence, a belief that she was ready to share the music that lived inside her. As she walked into the hall, she noticed the familiar faces in the crowd. Some had smiled at her before, others had watched silently, and a few, including the skeptic from the previous gathering, were watching intently, their expressions unreadable. The piano stood at the front of the room, polished and ready, its black and white keys gleaming under the soft stage lights. She felt a surge of nervous energy as she approached it, but she reminded herself of all the hours she had spent preparing, all the challenges she had overcome. She took a deep breath and sat down, letting her hands rest lightly on the keys. The audience was quiet now, their attention focused entirely on her. She closed her eyes for a brief moment and let her mind settle. This was not just about playing notes. It was about expressing herself, sharing her story, and connecting with the people in front of her. The first note she played was deliberate and clear, filling the room with a soft, resonant sound. It was a simple beginning, but it carried the weight of her journey, the hours of practice, and the determination that had brought her here. As she continued, the music began to flow more freely. Her fingers moved with confidence, guided by memory and emotion, each note carrying a piece of her heart. She played a piece she had been struggling with for weeks, one that required precision, timing, and deep feeling. At first, there were small hesitations, but she quickly found her rhythm, and the melody began to soar. The audience leaned forward, drawn into the music, their eyes widening as they realized the depth and skill of her performance. She could feel the skeptic's gaze on her, sharp and critical, but instead of being intimidated, she allowed it to push her further. Each note was a challenge, a statement that she was capable, that she had grown, that her music could speak louder than any doubt. She thought of the long nights spent alone at the piano, the mistakes, the frustration, and the moments of triumph. All of it was leading to this moment, and she let it guide her hands, letting the music become a reflection of her journey. The room seemed to disappear around her. There was no audience, no critic, no whispers of doubt. There was only the piano, the notes, and the story she was telling through sound. She allowed herself to feel every emotion, from fear to joy, from tension to release, and let those feelings shape the music. Her fingers danced over the keys, creating a melody that was at once powerful and delicate, precise and expressive. The audience was captivated, unable to look away, drawn into the world she was creating. She noticed subtle reactions as she played. A slight nod of approval from someone in the front row, a quiet gasp of surprise from another, and even the skeptic's expression softening, a hint of respect and astonishment appearing in his eyes. She realized that the music was not just about showing skill. It was about connecting, about breaking down barriers, and allowing people to feel something real and human. Every note carried emotion, every pause created anticipation, every crescendo built excitement. She was telling a story, and the audience was living it with her. As she reached the middle of her performance, she introduced a variation that required boldness and confidence. Her fingers flew over the keys, the notes cascading like water, filling the room with energy and emotion. There were moments of risk, where a wrong note could have broken the spell, but she moved through them with determination and focus. The music became a dialogue between her and the piano, a conversation that was honest, raw, and beautiful. She felt alive, more present than ever, and knew that this was the true power of her passion. The audience was completely absorbed now. Whispers had stopped, eyes were fixed on her hands, and hearts were beating in time with the music. She felt a sense of unity, a connection that transcended words. She was no longer playing for herself alone. She was sharing something universal, something that everyone could understand and feel. The skeptic, who had once doubted her, now seemed genuinely impressed, leaning forward as he listened, unable to hide the astonishment in his expression. It was a quiet acknowledgement, but it meant more to her than any applause could. As she approached the final notes, she slowed slightly, letting the melody linger, giving space for the music to resonate and settle in the hearts of the listeners. She played each note with care, allowing the emotion to shine through, until the last note hung in the air, soft and full of meaning. The room was silent for a heartbeat, a pause where everyone absorbed what they had just experienced, before the sound of applause and cheers filled the space. She opened her eyes, feeling a mix of relief, joy, and pride. The audience was on their feet, clapping and cheering, their faces filled with admiration and amazement. She smiled, humbled by the response, and felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had done more than play music. She had shared a piece of herself, shown the value of perseverance, and transformed fear into beauty. The skeptic approached her afterward, offering a sincere compliment, and she realized that the journey was not about proving others wrong, but about proving to herself that she could rise above doubt and fear. After the performance, she walked off the stage, her hands still tingling from the effort and emotion. People came up to her, expressing their awe, asking questions about the pieces she played, and praising her dedication. She listened and smiled, grateful for their encouragement, but also aware that the most important acknowledgement had come from within. She had faced the challenge, embraced the fear, and emerged with her music stronger and more alive than ever. That night, as she sat quietly in her room, she reflected on the experience. She thought of the lessons learned, the courage required, and the beauty of sharing something deeply personal with others. She realized that each performance was a step in her journey, a chance to grow, to connect, and to express herself fully. She knew there would be more challenges, more critics, and more moments of doubt, but she also knew that she had discovered a strength within herself that would carry her through anything. She touched the piano keys one last time before going to bed, playing a soft, gentle melody that was just for her. It was a reminder of where she had started, how far she had come, and the endless possibilities ahead. The music filled the room, a quiet celebration of perseverance, passion, and the power of believing in oneself. She felt content, ready for the next challenge, and eager to continue her journey, knowing that the piano would always be there to guide, inspire, and empower her. The applause had barely faded when she realized the room was still holding its breath, captivated by what she had just played. There was a quiet energy, a feeling that something extraordinary had happened, and everyone in the room seemed to sense it. She looked out at the audience, noticing faces she recognized and others she didn't, all watching her with wide eyes and open expressions. It was a rare moment when the music had spoken louder than words, when a single performance could hold the attention and hearts of so many people at once. She allowed herself a brief smile, but she didn't relax completely. She knew there was still more to give, more to show, more to prove. Not to anyone else, but to herself. The notes she had played were only a fraction of what she had prepared, and she wanted to push further, to explore the limits of her ability and let the music soar even higher. She took a deep breath, feeling the piano beneath her fingers and the anticipation in the room, and began to play again, this time with even more focus and determination. The first few notes were soft, almost tentative, drawing the audience in, making them lean forward to catch every sound. Then she began to increase the intensity, the melody becoming richer, more complex, and more expressive. Her fingers moved with precision and grace, each note carefully shaped, each chord resonating deeply. She could feel the emotion in the room, the way the music had reached people in a way that words never could. She allowed herself to feel the energy of the audience, to let it fuel her performance, and the music began to flow effortlessly. As the piece continued, she introduced variations and flourishes that she had been practicing for weeks. Each one was a challenge, requiring exact timing, perfect coordination, and emotional depth. She played with confidence, knowing that even if a mistake happened, it would not diminish the beauty of what she was creating. The audience was captivated, their eyes fixed on her hands and the piano, their faces reflecting surprise, admiration, and a growing sense of astonishment. Every chord, every note, every pause was a chance to tell a story, to share a part of herself, and she embraced it fully. The skeptic from the previous gatherings sat quietly, no longer smirking or whispering. His eyes were wide, and he seemed almost mesmerized by the music. For the first time, she saw him truly appreciating the skill, the emotion, and the courage she had poured into her playing. It was a subtle change, but to her it felt monumental. The music had broken through his skepticism, had challenged his assumptions, and had created a moment of connection. She felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that her hard work and perseverance were finally being recognized. The room was filled with a palpable energy, a shared experience that transcended words. People were leaning forward, their eyes shining, their attention fully captured. Some were holding their breath, waiting for the next note, while others were quietly moved, letting the music touch them in ways that were deeply personal. She felt the collective heartbeat of the audience in rhythm with her own, a silent acknowledgement that what she was doing mattered, that it had meaning, that it could inspire and move people. She continued to play, letting the music take her where it wanted to go. She experimented with dynamics, shifting from soft, delicate passages to bold, powerful chords that filled the room with sound. She allowed herself to feel every emotion fully, from tension to release, from sorrow to joy, from hesitation to courage. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a vessel for her thoughts, her dreams, and her soul. She was telling a story without words, and the audience was listening, understanding, and responding with their hearts. There were moments when she felt the old fears creeping in, the memories of being laughed at, of being underestimated, of feeling inadequate. But she did not let them take control. Instead, she turned them into energy, using them to fuel her performance, to make it more powerful and more honest. Every mistake she had ever made, every doubt she had ever felt, became a stepping stone, a part of the music that made it richer and more compelling. She realized that the journey itself had given her the depth and strength she needed to create something truly remarkable. The music began to build toward its climax, a section that she had worked on tirelessly, one that required courage, precision, and emotional depth. Her fingers moved swiftly over the keys, each note a burst of energy, each chord a declaration of skill and emotion. She could feel the audience's anticipation, their excitement, and their awe, and it pushed her to play even more passionately. The room seemed to vibrate with the intensity of the music, and she felt a sense of exhilaration and freedom that she had never experienced before. As the final notes approached, she slowed slightly, letting each sound linger, giving the audience a chance to absorb the impact. She played with care and attention, shaping the ending with subtlety and grace. The last note hung in the air, resonant and full of meaning, and then she allowed the silence to settle over the room. It was a profound, almost sacred moment, where everyone seemed to collectively hold their breath, processing what they had just experienced. She opened her eyes, feeling a mix of relief, pride, and quiet awe at what she had accomplished. The applause that followed was overwhelming. People rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, and smiling, their faces reflecting genuine astonishment and admiration. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sense of accomplishment that was both exhilarating and humbling. She had not just played music. She had created an experience, a connection, a moment that would linger in the memories of everyone present. The skeptic approached her afterward, offering sincere praise, and she realized that the performance had changed not only the audience's perception but also her own understanding of her capabilities. As the room began to clear, she stayed by the piano for a moment, letting the echo of the music settle. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the long nights of practice, the mistakes, the doubts, and the small triumphs. She understood now that the music was a reflection of all of it, that every struggle had contributed to the beauty and power of her performance. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the piano, for the people who had believed in her, and even for those who had doubted her, because all of it had shaped her into the musician she had become. Later, as she walked home, the cool evening air brushing against her face, she reflected on the experience. She felt a sense of peace and fulfillment, knowing that she had pushed herself beyond fear and doubt, and had shared something meaningful with others. She understood that the astonishment of the audience was not the ultimate goal. It was the result of honesty, effort, and passion. The real reward was the connection she had created, the confidence she had gained, and the joy of playing the piano with all her heart. That night, she returned to her room and sat at her piano one last time before bed. She played a soft, reflective melody, a quiet celebration of her journey, and a reminder of the power of perseverance, courage, and love for the music. The notes lingered in the air, gentle and soothing, carrying with them the story of her growth, the beauty of the performance, and the astonishment that had touched so many hearts. She knew that this was not the end, but a beginning, a foundation for future challenges and performances. And as she closed the lid and rested her hands, she felt a deep, enduring sense of accomplishment and hope for the music yet to come. The performance had ended, but the energy of the room still lingered, a quiet hum of admiration and excitement. She stepped away from the piano, her hands still tingling from the effort and emotion she had poured into every note. People approached her with smiles, congratulations, and words of astonishment. She nodded and thanked them, feeling a warm sense of validation. But it was more than just the recognition from others that filled her with pride. It was the knowledge that she had faced her fears, embraced her passion, and shared something deeply personal with the world. She noticed the skeptic from before, standing quietly near the edge of the crowd. He had approached her during a lull in the applause, and for the first time, she saw a look of genuine respect on his face. He spoke softly, acknowledging the depth of her talent and the courage it had taken to perform. His words were simple, but they carried weight, confirming something she had already known, that her dedication, perseverance, and love for the piano had transformed doubt into admiration. She smiled, feeling that the journey was not about proving someone wrong, but about proving to herself what she was capable of achieving. As the crowd began to disperse, she took a moment to absorb everything that had happened. She reflected on the path that had brought her here. The long nights of practice, the moments of frustration, the mistakes that had seemed insurmountable, and the small victories that had kept her going. Each experience had been a lesson, shaping her as both a musician and a person. She realized that the piano was more than an instrument. It was a partner, a mirror of her emotions, and a vehicle for expressing the story of her life. Walking home in the evening air, she replayed the performance in her mind. Every note, every pause, every chord seemed to carry a message. She thought about how she had transformed nervousness into focus, doubt into determination, and fear into artistry. The experience had shown her the power of perseverance and the importance of believing in oneself, even when others doubted or laughed. She understood that true accomplishment came not from the approval of others, but from the courage to pursue passion, overcome obstacles, and express oneself fully. At home, she returned to her piano, her fingers brushing lightly over the keys. She began to play a quiet, reflective melody, one that captured the emotions of the evening, the exhilaration, the relief, the joy, and the subtle echo of past struggles. Each note felt like a bridge between her past and present, connecting the journey of growth and dedication with the moment of triumph she had just experienced. She realized that music had always been her language, the way she communicated her thoughts, dreams, and emotions when words could not. She thought about the people who had doubted her along the way and understood that their skepticism had, in a way, helped her grow stronger. The laughter and criticism had forced her to refine her skills, to focus harder, and to believe in herself more deeply. She had learned that the true measure of talent was not in the absence of doubt or criticism, but in the resilience to continue despite them. Her journey was not about impressing others, but about becoming the best version of herself. And the evening's performance had been a testament to that growth. As she played, she reflected on the importance of perseverance. She remembered countless hours spent alone, practicing the same passages over and over, adjusting finger positions, correcting mistakes, and experimenting with dynamics. The process had been slow and often frustrating, but it had taught her patience and discipline. It had also taught her the beauty of small progress, the way tiny improvements accumulate over time into something extraordinary. That night, she realized that the audience's astonishment was only a reflection of the effort and love she had poured into her music. The quiet music she played now was not meant for anyone else. It was a personal celebration, a meditation on her growth and achievements. She allowed herself to savor the moment, to appreciate the skills she had developed, and to acknowledge the courage it had taken to keep going despite setbacks. She understood that every musician, every artist, faces challenges, moments of doubt, and times when progress seems impossible. What mattered was persistence, passion, and the willingness to keep learning and growing. As the melody unfolded, she also considered the power of connection that music could create. Earlier, she had seen how a simple note or a complex chord could shift the atmosphere in a room, touch hearts, and change perceptions. She realized that her gift was not just in playing well, but in sharing emotion, telling stories, and creating experiences that could move people. The audience had been astonished, not simply because of her technical ability, but because she had opened a window into her soul, allowing them to see, feel, and experience her journey. She spent hours exploring different pieces, moving from soft, reflective melodies to bold, confident compositions. Each transition reminded her of the balance between struggle and triumph, fear and courage, doubt and confidence. She recognized that her journey with the piano mirrored life itself, full of challenges and opportunities, mistakes and discoveries, fears and triumphs. Music was a way of understanding herself, processing emotions, and sharing her humanity with others. As night deepened, she paused and closed her eyes, letting the silence settle over the room. She thought about the future, the performances yet to come, and the pieces she had yet to master. She knew that more challenges awaited, more skeptics and moments of self-doubt, but she felt ready. She had learned that growth came from facing challenges head-on, embracing mistakes as lessons, and remaining committed to the path she loved. The evening had reinforced that understanding, showing her the power of resilience, passion, and focus. She also reflected on gratitude. She felt thankful for the teachers who had guided her, for friends who had supported her, and even for those who had doubted her, for all had played a role in her development. She appreciated the piano itself, a constant companion, a source of comfort, inspiration, and joy, and she valued the moments when she had pushed herself beyond fear, discovering the strength and confidence that came from embracing her talent fully. Before going to bed, she played one last simple melody, a quiet, intimate reflection of her journey. Each note carried emotion, telling the story of perseverance, growth, and triumph. She smiled, feeling a sense of completeness and peace. The journey was far from over, but she understood that she had laid a strong foundation, one built on effort, resilience, and love for the music. She knew that the next performance, the next challenge, would be met with courage and confidence. Lying in bed later, she replayed the evening in her mind. She remembered the astonished faces, the quiet moments of reflection, and the deep sense of satisfaction that came from sharing her music. She understood that true success was measured not by the applause alone but by the journey, the effort, and the courage to pursue what she loved. Every note she played, every chord she struck, was a testament to the dedication, patience, and passion that had brought her here. She realized that music was a lifelong companion, one that would continue to teach her, challenge her, and inspire her. She felt a quiet determination to keep learning, to keep exploring, and to keep sharing her gift. The astonishment of the audience would remain in her memory, but the most important part was the personal growth she had experienced and the joy she found in playing. That understanding filled her with hope and excitement for the journey ahead. The story of her journey with the piano was not just about performing in front of an audience. It was about embracing challenges, transforming doubt into confidence, and discovering the depth of her own capabilities. She understood that every musician, every artist, and every person faces moments of uncertainty, but it is in those moments that true growth occurs. She had learned to trust herself, to embrace her passion fully, and to allow her music to speak louder than fear or criticism. As she drifted off to sleep, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment and purpose. The piano would always be there, a faithful companion and a source of inspiration. She knew that the journey would continue, with new pieces to master, new audiences to reach, and new challenges to face. But she also knew that she had discovered a strength within herself, a resilience that would carry her through anything. And with that knowledge, she closed her eyes, ready to dream of melodies yet to come and the music she had yet to create.